Hello, class. This is group one. I'm here with Elena and Neil. My name's Jaden. And this week, week 9, we'll be talking about impacts of AI on science, medical, and business writing. So for this presentation, we're going to start off by briefly talking about the scientific writing process. Then we're going to move on and talk about how can AI be integrated into this process. We'll touch on artificial hallucinations, cautions of AI in medical writing, ethical concerns, potential procedures, impacts of AI in scientific and medical writing, and then we'll finish off with some discussion questions. So today, the scientific writing process is a really slow and requires a lot of manual work with lots of complex steps. So to start, researchers typically understand the content brief, which basically means they're bringing in previous knowledge and checking their wells of knowledge essentially with the literature they'll be reviewing. Then they move on to literature review. This also includes research. So this step alone takes upwards of 2 to 3 weeks. This research includes looking at diverse journals and databases that are part of the search. This step also tends to be error prone because often there are times when important articles are being left out because there's just so many. It's not possible for one person to be able to include everything in some cases and with some topics. Then they gather the results, methods, and discussion sections of their work. They'll start writing a manuscript while also keeping in mind the data integrity throughout the whole process. Afterwards, they have the peer review step, which also takes a long time, copy editing, approval, and sign off, and then finally a piece or the said piece can be published electronically. So how can AI be integrated into this process? Well, one good point of intervention is the research step. This step can be automated and it can also help reduce the risk of not including articles with important information. A quote from one of the articles we read this week, specifically the Leveraging Artificial Intelligence article, states that AI or machine learning can help in automating the literature search with entity recognition. So that would allow them to pick up specific words that you're looking for, and intent detection in the context of life sciences and pharmaceuticals. This also helps with a unified search across multiple data sources and databases. The review step can also be a point of intervention, as current AI natural language generation capabilities provide the tools needed to create narratives that summarize tabular data. These tools are already being used today, but they come with a requirement of manual intervention before the machine generated text can be submitted for publication. Another thing that AI can help with in the scientific process is with citation management. When it comes to making knowledge accessible to everyone, AI can also help translate articles for scientists who struggle to overcome language barriers. In the ChatGPT and other artificial applications, speeding up scientific writing article, it spoke a lot about how English is the lingua franca for science. So it's pretty predominant and often the language where most scientific research is being shared in. but AI can help with translation. Um, from this quote says machine translation, especially natural language processing using neural networks and deep learning, can almost help overcome language barriers. AI writing assistants have also become more streamlined and more sophisticated, especially. They can go beyond simple grammar and spelling checks. So when writing, researchers can uh, get synonym searches and suggested word choices from AI assistants, as well as paraphrasing to help alter the tone and style of text. Um, AI can also be used to rewrite blocks of text, so it can help authors with things like writer's block or um, helping with the clear understanding of what's being said.
Okay, so I'm Elena. Sorry, my camera isn't working, but I'm going to be talking about the next part. We're going to be going over the research that Sammy McFarlane and Hassan Al-Kaisi did in their article, Artificial Hallucinations in ChatGPT, Implications in Scientific Writing. So for this article, the researchers aimed to evaluate how generative AI can be used in medical and scientific writing. Specifically, they used ChatGPT because it is a natural language generator. So they did a couple things. They prompted the chatbot to write case reports, abstracts, and essays about various medical conditions. And then they reported on the quality of the writing and then the accuracy of the medical information that the AI gave. So the results were pretty mixed. They found that the AI can be incredibly helpful in medical and scientific writing when they were supervised and given correct data. But when left unsupervised, the AI produced hallucinations, and we will get into what exactly AI hallucinations are here in a second. And in the next slide, we'll talk about the negatives that they reported. So without scientists kind of evaluating the data and giving the data to ChatGPT, it produced hallucinations. So one of the first prompts they did, they asked the chatbot to write an abstract, or excuse me, asked the chatbot to write about specific medical conditions. And one of the first prompts, the AI was overall correct, but then it was asked to cite its sources. And it gave a list of outdated, mostly non-existent papers, or it cited papers that were unrelated to the topic. So even though it got the data right, it was unable to specify really where it got its data. They asked the chatbot, I think the first time they asked the chatbot for citations, it gave only citations from the early 2000s. And they asked, can you give us some that are from 2010 or more recent? And it gave them the exact same list. Each of the citations had kind of medical ID numbers, and those ID numbers usually did not correspond with the paper that the chatbot was citing. So essentially, it just like could not tell people what where it got its information from, which was one of the main concerns. And then, so for AI hallucinations are this phenomenon when an AI produces something that has no basis in the real world. It's essentially an AI making something up or fabricating information. These are more common in advanced AI systems, especially generative ones like ChatGPT, especially when they have large amounts of unsupervised data. And then in the next slide, we'll see an example of this. So here, the researchers asked ChatGPT to write an essay about liver involvement in late onset Pompe disease. And I am not an expert on LOPD, but according to the researchers, there has never been any reports of liver involvement in LOPD. There's no known link at this time between the liver and LOPD. And despite this, there's no information out there. As far as researchers know, they said there could possibly be, research in non-English. But as far as I know, there's no research on this. But despite the lack of information, ChatGPT wrote an essay very confidently linking the liver to LOPD. And this is an AI hallucination. It completely fabricated this information. It just kind of made something up, even though there's no data to back this up. There's no real world information. So those are the negatives. And then the positives, which we'll see here in the next slide, are mostly just when when the data is carefully evaluated. AI can be incredibly helpful and useful in scientific and medical writing. One positive they noted was the use of AI in medical education and testing. They were also able to create articulate, well-written abstracts for research paper when given the correct data. I think the authors put it really well. They said ChatGPT can make a linguistically coherent text out of the small scattered bullet points, almost like assembling a jigsaw puzzle. So when given the information and when human researchers carefully evaluated all the information and gave it to the AI, it was able to create something well-written and cohesive and factually correct. But when left on its own, it was hallucinating and making a mix of true data with improper sources or completely fabricated data.
Yeah, so I think we've touched on a lot of these topics already, but there's caution that should be had, especially when we're going towards medical writing and scientific writing, right? As Jaden and Elena have described, right? There's an aspect of AI that is legible and understandable, and then often it can be compatible with human writing. They can save you time in the revision process, specifically when you're going through these long medical journals, and if you're creating a long medical article, it can save you a lot of time in the revision process when you utilize it. And it has the potential to utilize peer-reviewed sources. However, when left on its own, like Lena had described, it can definitely, or it can be subject to these hallucinations or not be able to redraw back where it found the information. Specifically in medical writing too, it offers common lexicon, to communicate with the medical community, as well as the general public. So if you have different terms that are used to describe the same condition or disease, it has the ability to, identify that there's the same aspects, or you're talking about the same subject. The downsides, I think, are more outweighed in this article that's described. It often can pull from all types of writing, not just strictly peer-reviewed writing, and it can't detect or distinguish between contradictory statements, especially so if you have an example where it says, oh, this disease can be cured or it can't be cured, it isn't able to distinguish between those types of statements. And particularly, it can be subject to the will and wishes of commercial interests. Those who create and fund AI have the ability to pay to have certain articles taken as evidence or not in scientific research. So there is a component of bias that can happen when you're using medical research or it's drawing on medical research. And there are aspects where it can provide correct citations, but then there are some, like in Elena's example, where it's not able to pull up the right citations. It generates believable content that may not be true. Also, its ChatGPT scores better in completeness and credibility. The methods section that was absent in ChatGPT articles and a majority of references in its bibliography were unverifiable. So there are other ethical concerns, right? I think one of the primary concerns is plagiarism that is able to be a factor in AI writing. So there's a quote from the article where medical writing is going. Although some have touted the AI system as a way of checking and avoiding plagiarism, by its very nature, AI-generated texts are programmed to use series or sets of words or sequences of figures that the platform has dug out of the existing literature. This article poses the question that, is this not the very definition of plagiarism? There's also an aspect where AI can't be held accountable for all aspects of the work. Again, the article talks about how ensuring that questions related to accuracy or integrity of any part of the work are appropriately investigated or resolved. It does not have the capability to do that. So there are some options that are addressed by the World Association of Medical Editors. They identify that it cannot be eligible for authorship. Primarily, they can't understand conflicts of interest or have the legal standing to sign a statement. They can't hold copyright in this manner. So again, the World Association of Medical Editors does offer a few solutions, right? Authors that use AI should be transparent in how they're using it. They should also be responsible for the work that AI performs in their paper, taking total ownership of it, right? There's an aspect of the human also has the pivotal role in revising their work and making sure that the work that's provided is accurate. They also must find that all sources that have been designed to be omitted by chatbots be reviewed and included in those sources. So there's an aspect, if AI isn't including certain articles that are unfavorable or may have been biased in the programming of the AI, the author is responsible to bring up those articles as well. And then there's also a need for editors in general to have appropriate tools to detect AI generated content.
So for this next part, we're gonna touch on Mohammed Hamid's article. It's basically an open letter asking a lot of the questions that we've kind of brought up throughout this presentation. And I think Neil, especially in that last slide, really touched on of how do we proceed when it comes to scientific and medical research, when it comes to using AI, and what should the process be if we should use it in medical and scientific writing, and how should we use it? He posed a lot of questions in this article about how can we guarantee that an article was written without using AI, and touched on something Neil mentioned about, potentially having programs that can detect AI written content. That's something that's touched on a lot in this article. How do we evaluate researchers who use AI in their writing? Is their writing worth less than a researcher who did all the work themselves? How do we prevent or check for plagiarism when AI has been used? What's the line between plagiarism and using an AI in a helpful manner? How much work does the researcher have to put in before AI is allowed to contribute? So his suggestion was to create a program that can detect the use of AI in written content, and to have reviewers who are experts in their field evaluate research paper to ensure that the ideas that are present in the paper are new and not just AI rewriting already existing research. And just making sure that those experts are, human, and they can evaluate what's going on, make sure the sources are correct, all of that stuff. And then also he suggested creating consequences or penalties for those who use AI methods to write the content in the research or results portion of their papers. He suggested potentially putting the researcher on like a publishing house blacklist for a certain period, not allowing them to publish for an amount of time if they did use AI. And that leads us kind of to our discussion questions of what do we think about this? When people are using AI in professional writing, whether that's scientific writing or medical writing or business writing, should there be consequences? If so, what consequences should be in place? Like Hamid suggested, should there be a blacklist for authors who used AI? Or how much should they use AI? What point should we consider, blacklisting them or not allowing them to publish? So what do you think is an appropriate and ethical use of AI, and what would be considered plagiarism? Where do we draw that line? And then the second question is about evaluating work when we know that AI has been used. So when when evaluating the professional work of writers or researchers in medical, scientific, and business fields, should the use of AI be considered less than researchers who do not use AI? How should we evaluate work that has used AI tools? Should we use programs like people have suggested that detect AI written content? And what steps can we take to ensure that the data is correct and that there's been no plagiarism? So yeah, these are the questions we pose. These are kind of ethical dilemmas and procedural dilemmas of what steps do we take to make sure everything is correct, because we know there's like the potential for hallucinations or incorrect data or plagiarism. So how do we prevent that? But also while using AI, it can be an incredibly helpful tool. Where's the line there? What can we do to make sure it stays ethical while also, using it to its potential? And I think that covers everything. That was week 9, the various readings and articles, and yeah, that was the use of AI in professional writing.